It's Brian Preston, the Money Guy.
So I want to bring it back and talk about, because one of the things Senator Roth, when this thing was started, is he wanted maximum flexibility to allow people to have access. And we look at these, and Bo, I've heard you. We've done enough shows together. You sneak this in there every now and then, and I kind of cringe when you do it because I don't like it. I will straight up tell you, I think Roth assets, because a 20-year-old's every dollar can turn into $88, right, and every 25-year-old's dollar can turn into $54. I see how much potential every dollar in that army of dollar bills could become. I get sad when somebody wants access to that money before it's actually doing that. But I feel like since Senator Roth wanted early access, let's kind of walk through some of these one-offs of reasons that you could get in, and let's kind of give some love to, is this a good idea? Is this a bad idea? Sure. And kind of make sure everybody understands. So the first thing he had mentioned was first-time home purchases.
Yeah, that's definitely an option. You know, there are some options where you can use money up to a certain extent. I think it's $10,000
yeah,
to pull out for a first-time home purchase. And yeah, I guess that's something you could do. What we would encourage you to think about, though, is if you are someone who thinks you're going to buy a home in the next 2, 3, 5, 8 years, let's work on saving those assets for that specific purpose rather than having to tap into retirement assets. Because even though it's available and you could do that, it's much better if you just fund your Roth, leave that money in there, let it work, let it do its thing, and then build up that $10,000 elsewhere so you're not having to tap into those assets.
And then another place, you're talking about flexibility. He mentioned as long as you've had it in there 5 years, you could have tax-free growth for education expenses.
That's true.
So a lot of people will talk about, and we've even done shows on this, when we're talking about saving for college. Should you use Roth assets for education expenses?
I mean, again, you certainly could. It's an option, but we think there are much better vehicles out there. When you look at like 529 plans, I mean, they are specifically designed to allow you to save for college. And so again, if you know that college is something that you want to fund, something you want to be able to either do for yourself or help your children or grandchildren with, there are better vehicles out there that will allow you to do that than a Roth. Again, it's not an either or. We think you should do both.
And I want to tell you, if you want to do the best gift for your children possible, don't live in their basement. Unless they want you to live in the basement. I mean, I'm just saying that it's not one of those things where you're required to live in the basement because you're broke as a joke and can't do it. And I've said it a gazillion times. Junior can go get a student loan. Mom and pops, there are no retirement loans. I mean, there's just not. There's not a cottage industry out there booming, trying to lend senior people who didn't save for retirement money. So to take that money out for education expenses should be a last resort, because that money is going to be better served. That army of dollar bills will be better served working for you for retirement. And then this last one, this is you. I have to pick on you. Go ahead.
I'm going to put this out there. So I don't love the thought of using a Roth for first-time home purchases. I also don't love using it for college. But there's one very unique thing about Roth IRAs, and it's whether you're high income, low income. The limit is you can only get so much into it every single year. It's $5,500 or $6,500 if you're over 50. So if you're someone who is 20 years old, you have a natural and distinct advantage over someone who's 40 years old. You have more years that you can get that $5,500 in there. So a lot of folks say, hey, guys, you tell me I have to have my 6 months of emergency reserves, and so I'm going to get that 6 months built up, and then I'll start doing my Roth. And okay, I like that, and I agree with that. But one thing I would think about is every year that passes that you don't do the Roth is a year that you've missed the opportunity that you can't go get it back. And so what I tell folks is, okay, get enough to cover some of your basic living. So you definitely want to have cash on hand, but if you are $5,000 short in where your 6 month emergency reserve should be versus putting that $5,000 in your Roth, I tell young folks to go ahead and do the Roth, because if you ever got into a really tight situation, a real pickle, you can go get that basis if you needed it. You can't go back next year and fund last year's Roth that you didn't do.
I'm going to concede something to you, because I'm sitting here as you're telling this, and I'm like, I kind of see where Bo's going with this. Remember, these things started really in 98. Mm-hmm. I mean, because the legislation was passed in 97. So I started, my first Roth IRA contribution was 98. Right. I distinctly remember I graduated college in the mid-90s, so I'm just a few years out of school. Money is not lying around at that point. I still regret, because my wife and I met in college. So even though we got married in 98, I had her funding her first Roth in 98 as well. And I still look back, and this is a confession. I only put $2,000 in my Roth in '98, and I know my wife only put $1,450. It's sick that I know these numbers, but
How do you remember that?
and it's one of those things. I'm thinking as you're sharing this is that I have a regret. Now realize 2,000 is all you could put in '98.
Yeah.
So I did it, but my poor bride, I could have probably squeezed her and said that $550 that you didn't get in there, if you multiply it by these factors that we're talking about, that's decent chunk of money. And that wasn't the only year that didn't get maxed out while we were having some tough financial times, starting a company and other things that went on. So I think you do have a point. It's one of those things, because now that $550 isn't as big of a deal as it was when we were in our early 20s.
But it's a real big deal when you compound
when you think about it for retirement. So I think that you might have a point, but I tell you, if you do this strategy where you are choosing, because I know when you're in your 20s and even in your early 30s, because you're in the whole kid thing, you're trying to save for a house, money is tight. I get it. When you're trying to sacrifice and live like no one else, so you can do the whole live like no one else that Dave Ramsey's always talking about, it is tight. So if that's the case, I'm going to go with you there, Bo. I think that you could, if you're at the end of the year, you haven't maximized that Roth, and you say, do I put it in the emergency or do I put it in the Roth? Putting it into the Roth with essentially your thumb or your finger on the, as a placeholder, saying I might have to get that money back if something happens. Right. I don't think that's horrible. So,
I've made him a believer.
I don't know that I'm completely converted,
in real time
but
right
I will
here.
tell you did a compelling job there. Well done on, cause we didn't talk about that in show prep, but it is, hearing you share it, I was like, that was me. I want to talk about, cause this is something I don't see in any other content out there. When I'm watching Roth videos or any financial video, that makes me sound really ridiculous, but, people, when we get listener emails and people ask us, well, I appreciate the advice you're sharing, but what do we do? And realize we try to avoid, it's hard to go into how to invest your money, because every one of you watching this or listening to this, you're all distinct and unique. I mean, you all are different ages. You all have different risk profiles. You all have different goals of what you want. Some of you are fire. Some of you want to work until you're 86 years old. Everybody's different, and your retirement picture looks different, but I always feel like it's a cop-out when you say, well, how should I invest? And we're like, well, we can't do that. We can't do that. I mean, so, and plus I have to be very careful, because I will tell you, regulators don't like to give advice. And I don't want you guys to think this is an infomercial. I mean, we want you guys to become clients of the firm. That's why we believe in this abundance cycle. You come, learn, listen, absorb, apply it. And then hopefully after you hit your success moment, you'll say, hey, those guys are the ones that planted the seeds. I want to come back. So that still is a goal, but I want you to know that this content is educational in what we're doing. But walk them through. You're the CFA on staff, but this is not a recommendation, but you can at least give some guidance on how do you invest the Roth money? Yeah, so
it's really kind of common sense when you think about it. So what's the real big benefit of a Roth IRA or Roth 401k? There's this tax-free growth, right? Mm-hmm. So if you think about it logically, the more dollars I can get growing, or the more growth I can have happen, the more beneficial it is. So when you think about how you're splitting up your asset location and your asset allocation, you really want to hold your high growth assets inside of your Roth IRA.
It's true.
So the things that you think are going to have the largest growth potential over the long term, whether you personally believe that that's stock X or stock Y or the S&P 500 or international or whatever the case may be, you want to hold that type of asset inside of your Roth, because that's where you're going to get the biggest bang for the buck. But one thing, when you're first starting out, and maybe this is your very first $5,500 that you're putting into a Roth IRA for the very first time, maybe you don't want to go figure out, is now a good time to buy Amazon or Tesla or Apple or fill in the blank of any other company. There are some amazing solutions out there that can still be very aggressive, that can still provide a lot of growth opportunity over your working lifetime, and they're called target retirement funds.
That's exactly right.
If you're someone who's 20 years old, go pick out a long-dated fund, a 2050, a 2060 fund, and it's going to be very, very aggressive while you're far away from retirement. But then as you get closer and closer and closer to retirement, it's going to naturally adjust for you. But while you are far out there and you have these dollars in a Roth, it's going to be turbocharged, and you're going to get a lot of really solid appreciation over the lifetime of that investment.
I think that's good advice. So for people, let's give some dollar limits, because I like to fine-tune this a little bit. I think somebody who's starting out, we focus on, if you think about that pyramid of your financial base, I want you to be really focused on accumulating the assets, not necessarily on what they should be investing in. So that's why I love target retirement assets for people under 250.
Yep.
I do think that once you get to 250, 300, because more than likely, once you get to that level of assets, you've got some more complexities going on in your life. The kids are getting older. You're trying to figure out paying off debt versus investing. You might need somebody to look over your shoulder and give some thoughts. And that's when maybe you do want to come look for some additional guidance at that point. But we love, that's one of the great things about technology is that, think about it, 10, 15 years ago, target retirement funds didn't exist. A product that you just go choose the year you think you want to retire and it does the rest. That's amazing. Phenomenal. It really is. And then, but it does, you said something that made me think of the tax nerd in me has to make sure I put it on the record. If you are going to use a Roth asset because you want to be the next Mitt Romney that has 7 figures in Roth assets, because we have clients that they got an employer payout and they had a one-time option to take some of the after-tax money and turn it into a Roth. And we have one that turned it into close to a 7-figure Roth account because the timing was perfect with his company stock. But that's the exception, not the standard. And here's the thing about Roth assets. If you're wrong on your one single stock play, no deductible losses.
Oh, that's a good point.
You get tax-free growth, but there's no deductible losses on the tax return. So be very careful on what you're doing with your stock picking.
So here's what I just heard the CPA say. If you're going to invest and you're going to make money, do it in the Roth. If you're going to invest and you're going to lose money, do that in a taxable account so that you can harvest the loss. That's a genius.
If only you have the crystal ball to know the difference on the front end or back end. But it is something I feel like we have to tell. So, Bo, kind of bring this thing home. We've kind of walked them through. Tax-free growth is spectacular. Required minimum distributions out the window, maximum flexibility. What are we missing here? What do we need to add?
I think here's the big takeaway. The Roth IRA is not just the young man or woman's game. Mm-hmm. There are a lot of different people, all walks, all stages, all incomes, where Roth assets can be a hugely pivotal piece of your financial picture. Whether it's providing flexibility in retirement, providing tax savings in retirement, it's just a really great thing to look at. And I can't tell you how often I have conversations with someone and I say, well, why don't you have any Roth assets? Oh, well, we were very fortunate. We made too much money and we just can't do it anymore. Yep. And then I tell them about this opportunity where they could possibly do some backdoor Roth contributions, and it blows their mind. And it's going to really impact what their retirement looks like 20 years from now. So it's at least something, if you're not familiar, you ought to get familiar with it, re-listen to the show again, and figure out if Roth assets are something that are missing in your financial picture. And if you are somebody who has Roth assets, make sure they're not just sitting in a money market. They're not just sitting in cash.
That breaks my heart.
Because you were missing out on a huge, huge, huge opportunity in doing that.
Guys, what else could we say? We work with clients all across the country. If you love the common sense, like beyond common sense, we're going, as well as the knowledge and feeling like you have friends that you could share ideas with and doesn't talk down to you. Love for you to reach out to us. Go check us out, moneyguy.com. If you're just listening to us, go check out the video content when we start doing live streaming. I can't believe I'm on record telling you because that means we have to do it now. It's one of those things where I think you'll see a lot of behind the scenes. You're going to see how little we edit during the show, and you're going to see how much we edit at the beginning of the show. So it'll be a lot of fun stuff to go check out. I'm just so thankful for all of you guys tuning in.
I have a question. If you're still with us right now, let me ask you this. We're going to do this live stream thing where you can essentially tune in and watch us record this show live. And we're even thinking about doing like a Q&A after the show. So you send us some questions during the show. We will answer your questions.
That's a nervous laugh on my part, by the way.
If that's something that you'd be interested in or something you want to know more, just shoot us an email. Let us know. Let us kind of gauge the interest, and we'll see if that's something that you guys would find valuable. Because ultimately, at the end of the day, we want to deliver value to you to help you go beyond common sense.
MoneyGuy.com. I'm your host, Brian Preston. We'll talk to you again soon.